South Dakota. I'm originally from Ohio, graduated from Bowling Green, and yeah.
All right, sounds good.
I'm not sure what's going on in the other room. They're having much more fun.
Our clapping actually happens after introductions. Number two is Zach Lashway from WPHL in Philadelphia.
That is right. My name is Zach. I am a reporter anchor in Philly. Fill-in producer. I fill in at the desk as well. General assignment reporter for the most part. Before Philly, I was in Montana, and I covered, like Matt, I've covered politics and business there. That was my beat, and I was promoted to more than co-anchor producer. And I've been in Philly for almost 3 years.
All right. Next is Maria Santana from CNN en Español.
I am currently the New York anchor correspondent for CNN en Español. Do some work also for CNN, HLN, and CNN International, so across all networks and platforms. And I've been at CNN for 4 years. General assignment reporter. I cover everything, all sorts of news stories with a national and international interest, mostly, from finance to politics to fashion to celebrity, just a little bit of everything. Before that, I was a producer and assignment editor at the local Telemundo station, and then I was reporting and a bureau manager for a small startup station called Mega TV before moving to Seattle.
Next on the hit parade is a co-worker of mine, good friend, Tom Skilling. He's the chief meteorologist here in Chicago at WGN.
Right. Thank you, Sean. Thanks
And,
for the invitation.
and for the next hour, we will be listening to where he's worked and what he's done.
Yeah, I'm kind of the old timer here. I've been at WGN for 36 years. I started in 1978 at GN, but I started at 14, a little radio station out in Aurora. I had the audacity to write these people. I wanted to get some weather maps, and I thought a radio station could do anything. So I wrote them an 8-page letter and told them I thought I could do a better forecast than they were getting from Chicago. And they bought it. So I did that in high school, and a little UHF TV station signed on out there 3 years after that, Channel 60. So I did that, and I went up to the University of Wisconsin, studied and worked there, and a year down to Jacksonville, Florida, to WTLD, the NBC affiliate, and then up to Milwaukee, where I worked with a puppet. They saddled me with a puppet up there. Albert the Alley Cat.
Try to be authentic with that.
I know, yeah. But I'll tell you, after you've worked a year in the South and you like changing seasons, you're anxious to get back to a changing weather regime. And then came to WGN. And it's been a fascinating run. You know, what's happened in meteorology is just a revolution. And we have tools that we work with today that are just amazing. And this is a time where we're talking climate change, and weather is very much on people's minds. We have more billion-dollar weather disasters we ever had, so it's a great time to be a meteorologist.
And it's a busy time, too.
It is.
And I'm Sean Lewis. I am a weekend morning anchor at WGN, and I have worked in many different markets, Fargo being the first one. I interned in Minneapolis and in Milwaukee. Then I went to Madison for my second job, then Rockford, Illinois as morning anchor, then Richmond, Virginia as weekend anchor, and then finally 7 years ago landed in Chicago. So I've taken on various roles, usually general assignment report, do feature reporting, and then I anchor, fill in on the weeks and stuff like that. So we all have, I guess, and you add to the collection here, I think we have probably about 100 years of experience here. Thank you, Tom, for bringing us.
But the years of wisdom.
Yes. So many years of wisdom. All right, so first let me take a little people poll here. How many people right now are on the air?
Radio or TV or?
Either. All right, and how many people think that perhaps they want to be on the air in some various form, either being an expert or being a reporter or an anchor or something like that? At some point. All right, well, great. Welcome to you all. You know, the question here, and it was Jen Christensen who actually put us all together, is how to be authentic on the air. And what I have found over the course of the 20 years I've been working in TV is there's a lot of different us's that we have. We act differently in front of our parents than we do in front of a group of friends, than we do at a job interview or something like that. So there's a whole bunch of different faces that we can put on for ourselves, and the key to being successful on the air that I have found, and you guys will probably agree, is to see which one actually comes through the screen and is something that the vast majority of people will actually relate to when they're watching you on the air. And it also depends on what kind of story you're doing too. Whether you're a reporter, an anchor, a weatherman, whether you're an expert in some various form and you're being interviewed for a topic, it all has to do with what the particular situation is, and it's all trial and error, and you just kind of fake it until you find yourself up until that point. And there have been a number of times when I personally have done live shots and I am nervous as all get out on the inside because it's a breaking news story or something like that, and you know exactly how you're feeling and your stomach is turning and you're like, my God, this must look like absolute crap on the air. And you look at it later like, well, that doesn't look so bad. And it's because you have done it enough where you've learned how to totally mask your inside feelings, and you come across authentic on the air, but if you feel nervous on the air, then your viewer's going to feel nervous and it's going to be an uncomfortable situation. So you learn how to kind of mask that, even though if you're jumping in and out of your skin in person and you know how you feel, if you are able to put a calm face on it, it all works out, and usually it adds to your energy. So the one thing that I want to ask the panel here is, how should you look? How do you look authentic on the air? And we'll start with, because I know, well, let's see, how should we do this? Should we go with the longest answer first? Well, you know what, we'll begin, ladies first. Maria, why don't you go for it? How long have you worked in TV, and how long do you think it took you to find your look?
I've been in TV about 10 years, almost. It takes a while. It takes a couple of years of you practicing and practicing and doing and doing and doing. And I always tell people, my very first report on camera, I will never look at it ever again in my whole entire life. Because if I did, I would be like, why did I go down this path? But I think I think those times that you have to look at your work, you have to look at yourself every time that you do something and learn from it and say, well, this didn't work, this worked, this didn't work, and not be discouraged if you feel, oh my God, this was completely terrible. Not be discouraged, but just keep learning from it. And it takes a while to find, yourself in being comfortable with the camera. That's what you have to find, is that moment when you just feel comfortable with the camera and you feel like you're speaking to one of your friends. And one of the things that I do is every time I have a story, I always think to myself, when I stand there, how would I tell my friend? How would I tell, my family? And that's how I tell the viewers, because they want to see somebody who's genuine, authentic, and who is speaking to them and not at them. So, but it takes a while. Just go over your work and learn from what you're doing and just repeat.
And Zach, how long and how did you overcome that obstacle of looking into what amounts to be a one-eyed monster looking at you on a camera lens? It's very unnatural to look into a camera and talk to it like you and I are talking right now.
And to hold the eye contact.
And to hold the eye contact and not look away. How long does it take you, and what were the tricks that made you more comfortable in doing that?
To elaborate on what Maria was saying, I think that totally is very true. And I always found it easier to, as if you're telling your grandmother. Tell stories if you're talking to your grandmother. And so I picture my grandmother on top of the little iris. But it's all about repetition. And I think, we at PHL, these two gentlemen they work at the Tribune station here in Chicago, and I'm at the Tribune station in Philly. And we had a management change back in March. And so we switched gears. So I went from doing human interest stories to live breaking news every day. And that first week, it's rusty compared to what it is, and I think being on air, it's like a sport. You have to work at it every day, and going back this coming Monday, having been off the air for a few days, it's going to be a little rusty. But it's all about repetition, and I think it definitely takes some time, and you just learn your skills.
Now, Matt, you are in Youngstown. It's market 113.
Yeah.
So it's a smaller market compared to like market 3 here in Chicago, where we actually get to go out with a camera guy or a woman every single day. You sometimes are one-man banding, correct?
Yeah.
Tell me how that is, and this is going to be the future for all of us eventually, is that we're not going to have someone to bounce ideas off of. It's all going to be on us. Editorial, visual, and all that. How do you find that you are able to relate to the camera when that is your partner in crime?
Oh, my camera's my best friend on the field sometimes. No, it's one of the nice things about shooting my own video and stuff like that is you can really express who you are visually through the things that you shoot as well. Like on top of just being on air, you can also, you can show your creativity when it comes to shooting things. Like I think being authentic and successful on air isn't just doing live shots, isn't just reporting, it's how you write a story, how you shoot a story, how you just come across visually, like, and edit the piece. Like those are a lot of big things when it comes to putting it all together. And Sean is right, that is the way of television. I mean, anybody who says anything different, they're just, yeah, they're living in the, back in the dark ages. So like, so I mean, it's very, I mean, yeah, using my camera, I mean, your camera, you really see how you can really express yourself and move forward from that. And then, but yeah, you don't have anybody else to really bounce ideas off of. It's kind of a trial and error type of thing. It's what works, what doesn't work. If it doesn't work the first time, you know not to do it the next time, and shift gears and so on and so forth.
Now, Tom started in radio and now works in TV and radio and does both. What do you find works for you in either medium that doesn't work on the other? For example, you find being able to tell a story easier on TV than on radio. What works, what doesn't work for you?
Well, you know, I started on radio initially, and I found that a wonderful way to get into television. I'm glad I had that kind of base or foundation to begin with, because you learn to communicate through a medium like broadcasting, where you're not so
You have to
literally
paint a
right in
picture.
front of you.
You have to paint a picture with words.
You know who was my model? I'm one of these people, for my first 75% of my career, I thought they were going to fire me every day I walked in.
Don't let him tell you that, he still does.
Oh, I'll tell you, it's just awful.
Keeps you
I
humble.
looked at tapes, I thought, oh my God, you know, God bless any industry that would allow this to go on and not fire me right away. And then one day, I decided, you know, I'm going to do something revolutionary, because this is a hell of a way to live your life, worrying about being fired every day. I thought, I'm going to go in and say, hey, they haven't fired me yet, so I'm going to make the dangerous assumption this won't be the day the pink slips on the desk, you know, and so that relieved some of the pressure. You know, the guy, I always looked at other people who did what we do. First of all, I think the weather person is kind of dealing with a unique, subject. You're close to your viewers and your listeners right away, because everybody has some relationship with the weather, and they're kind of interested in what's going on. So I've always thought the weather person has kind of a unique relationship with the people that we're serving and communicating to. But I always looked at a guy like John Coleman, who broke away when I started. You had plexiglass boards that you drew on with leaky pens that stained your clothing and all the rest. And then we moved into computer graphics. I mean, there's been a revolution in the way we visualize what we're doing. You say to yourself, what is there about the weather that's coming up that's going to impact people? And this comes to what you guys were saying. You're talking to somebody. You think, if I was having a conversation about what's about to happen in the next 3 days of the weather, what about the weather would be of interest to me? And that's what you started talking about. But I looked at a guy like John Coleman, who used to have this uncanny ability. I thought, this guy presents the most coherent weather presentation. The graphics are beautiful. They break the mold of the plexiglass pens. He used colors and graphics and all, satellite imagery, radar. All these were integrated within the show. We do this today as a matter of course. But I thought, what a beautiful, how his show flows. And so I realized what he did was he set an outline in his head about what he wanted to communicate. Here's the story I've got to tell. Here's how I can communicate it most clearly to my viewers. And here's what they may find interesting about the story I'm about to talk about. And I think if you approach it that way and outline it in your head, whatever you're about to say, and then go about telling a story as if you're communicating to a friend or a family member, I think that's great advice. Beyond that, I had, we had news consultants, they brought talent coaches.
That was my next question, is I have been subject to consulting before from various employers, and in various stages of our careers, our managers in their enlightened states have brought in people who know better than anyone else how to get us to be our true selves on the air. And it ends up being a version of ourselves, like I was talking about in the beginning. It's what works on camera. And there was actually one consultant in the number of consultants that I've had talk to me in my career where I've actually said, you're right, that's a good point. Thank you very much for making me better. Now, how do you go about that, Tom? Because you have had, he's told me stories about back in the day going and like being behind a two-way mirror.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell that story
shopping
really quick.
centers, when they do these market research studies that establish our Q ratings if you're working with the audience, so they invite people into these rooms and there are two-way mirrors in them, and that people don't realize they're being watched, often by the subject that they're critiquing. So I remember I had a news director who hauled me into a shopping center here on the west side of town. I mean, first of all, this is, you know, for somebody who couldn't stand looking at himself to begin with on tape. So then they showed this unknown group a piece of your work, and they have at it, folks. What do you think of this guy? You know, and boy, they fire him. You know, send him anywhere. And you've got to deal with that and somehow get him. It was really brutal. And there was actually some guy who said, I'd ship him back wherever I got him from, you know, or something like that. So I thought, wow. And I remember John Coleman's advice to me when I used to talk to him was, you got to have a shtick. And I thought, yeah, he said some boss had told him one time, everybody's got to have something that sets you apart from everybody else, a shtick. And I thought, well, that leaves me out because I just talk about the weather. I'm not a comedian. But the shtick is we all have shtick. Don't let anybody ever snow you like that. You get up, it's your enthusiasm toward what you do. And I think, you know, I've often thought, watching one of my programs is like passing an auto accident. You know, it's just, somebody stops and you want to kind of look at what's going on, and you're not sure you're going to like what you see. You know, and here's this guy up here who seems fascinated by all these maps blinking by him and all the rest. So I don't know what's going on here. Maybe it's like an epileptic attack, but let's go along for the ride and see where we end up. You know? And I don't even understand everything he's telling me, but he seems excited by it. So let's see what he has to say about it, and maybe it'll mean something to me. So I think sometimes you have to put aside worrying what the reaction is and just go for it. And if you find the subject interesting, we all do. We're in this business because we tell stories. I think just have fun with it, and the viewers come along for the ride. You know, if you enjoy it, somehow your body language communicates it, and they don't. You know, it's not something you can be taught. It's just either there or it isn't. And if it is, then we all maintain our channel.
Now, Maria, you find yourself in a unique position because you do reports not only for CNN in Espanol, but also CNN in English. Do you find yourself changing the way you tell a story based on those two distinct audiences?
Definitely. I mean, I think there's a way that you know, I can relate to my Spanish-speaking audience that I can't necessarily relate to my English-speaking audience. So there is I have to adjust sometimes how I say things and how I do things based on that. But just to go to that is, for me, you know, I grew up in this country. I was born in the Dominican Republic, but I moved to the U.S. when I was like 4 years old. So, you know, for all intents and purposes, I'm an American, and I am. And it's a very, it's a weird world for me because I grew up in this country, so my Spanish is very much influenced by the U.S. It's not formal Spanish as you would learn in Latin America. And then my English, and I have a little New York accent. I've been in New York my whole life, and a little Harlem uptown girl accent. So in the English market, people think I have an accent, and in the Spanish market is like, well, your Spanish isn't formal enough to be in Spanish. And you know, I just said to both sides, I said, well, I'm very confident in what I do and what I know, and this is who I am. Yeah. I am a mix of both of those things, and that's what's going to come through for me on the air, and that's what I go with. And I've been told, you know, if you want to appeal in the English market, you know, to the nation, you have to lose the accent. And I say, well, you know, if I have to lose my accent, then Richard Quest has to lose his accent. Because his is from over there, and mine is from 50 blocks from where I am right now. And you're going to have moments like that where people are going to tell you things and, you know, try to give you advice on how to be on the air, how to speak on the air, what mannerisms to use. Right. And you take it and you say, okay, I get what you're saying, but if this is you because you want to be you. And that's the most important thing. And how I speak and how I do it, and then if you know Latino people, we talk like this a lot. So I try to control it when I'm on English television because, you know, in Spanish it's okay, but again,
Italians
that's
do
me.
that too.
But that's me. And I think the viewer appreciates it more when you're you and not trying to be somebody else.
Exactly.
Zach, you started in Montana. You weren't there that long, and all of a sudden you found yourself in a large market. What have you learned in your time in the last 2.5 years in Philadelphia from the moments that you first began on the air? And I assume that when you were in Great Falls, you still got all those butterflies, and you got very nervous. How did you overcome that once you got to Philly, and where do you find yourself changing how you act on the air over the last 2.5 years?
I think that's a really great question. Having started in Montana and moving to Philly, I remember, and we were at the #1 station in Montana, and you had a lot of respect from that. And then moving to Philadelphia, you were going from being a big fish in a small city to a very small fish in a huge city.
Yeah.
And at the time I was 23 when I made it to Market 4, and I was working with veterans who had been in the field for eons.
As long as you had been alive.
Yes. As long as I've been alive, and they worked their whole careers just to make it to that point. And I can remember showing up for my first story, and there was no respect because these veterans had thought, you know, look at this young punk here at this age. So, you know, really making these contacts, establishing these connections, and proving that you're serious and you can do just as good of a job as anybody else there. That was something that I obviously had to work at, and it didn't come as easily as had I had 15 years under my belt.
Matt, your wheelhouse is news.
My wheelhouse is news.
But you're also called upon in Youngstown to do weather.
Weather, you know, a little bit of everything. Right? Live shots, do it all.
And how do you go about that? Because I think a lot of folks in here, if they're not on the air already, have an expertise in some area. And they may be called upon in an interview to be that expert in a particular area. And when you're called upon to do the weather, which you're not a trained you took a meteorology course.
I took a meteorology course, and it was horrible. It was the worst experience I've ever had.
And you got a D in it. How do you go about preparing for that moment when you're on TV and you're talking about something you are inside? You're like, I'm not qualified to do this.
Oh my gosh, the worst part about that is when we have severe weather, when there's severe weather going on, because we are a very unique station. We have, I think altogether we have 5 different affiliates underneath one roof. We have 3 that do news on it and weather and things of that nature. But when it comes to doing weather, a lot of times, luckily we have usually a more trained meteorologist up on one of the other stations. So usually I'm like, all right, what's going on? Talk to them and stuff. But I mean, I just talk. I just explain very little I know about the weather, and I just smile. And I smile. I smile. I blink my eyelashes to a lot of people. No, I'm just kidding. So it's very. I mean, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to be to try to act like you know what you're talking about when you have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. But I mean, as time goes on and stuff like that, it's very you become authentic because it's. You know, kind of like what Tom was saying, it's kind of like it's like a car wreck. You just watch it because most of the time my weather is a car wreck because I'm like, after I finally got the green screen down, it made it a lot easier. But I mean.